Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or Mosi-Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised.
Hello, and welcome back to MOTS. I, of course, remain Scott Thurlow, joined tonight by Jane Manzer.
Hello.
And longtime friend of the show, first-time guest, Dave Pung.
Hello.
And so, as we sometimes do now and again on MOTS, we sort of are doing, came up with an idea for sort of broadly thematically related films or topically related, and we decided on cerebral films, and then, of course, had a sad discussion on what exactly the hell which ones would count or not.
I was looking up some lists, and they're all over the place when what we consider cerebral films, including giving number ones to things I don't consider to be all that groundbreaking or intellectual.
Yeah, so it became its own rabbit hole, but so regardless, for this intro one, we decided on the movie eXistenZ by David Cronenberg, which is one of I enjoyed this film a lot, and we're going to discuss why it possibly is cerebral and how many levels it is. So with that, we're going to go with E with the introduction.
Okay, so this movie is about what the nature of reality, and more so about kind of getting lost within VR. And it starts off with at a church, they're running kind of a game test.
A focus test.
Yeah, a focus test for this new game called eXistenZ. The title will drop right away. And among the group is this Jude Law, who is basically a PR, not a little bit above intern.
Low end, but not quite intern.
And this game designer who is world-renowned. And, all the other testers, including one of the PR guys is one of the Doctor Who's who dies immediately.
Christopher Eccleston.
Yes.
And, very young. Very young.
So there's an assassination attempt on the game designer's life, leading to kind of panic and for Jude Law and the game designer to escape. And that kind of starts off the rest of the film, which the assassination plot is kind of a driving force, but
it is and isn't. It's there, sort of. But no, sure.
It's an engine.
Yeah, exactly. It's an impetus, and I think we'll speak more about this possibly in themes and dialogue. But I do think it's a good intro. It gets you sort of right into it. It's rather quick. I wouldn't say it's abrupt, but jumps you right in, sets everything up, and then Jude Law and Jennifer Jason Leigh go on the run from various conspiratorial forces who may or may not be hunting them, and they may or may not be in a virtual reality game doing all this stuff.
They may not be in a virtual reality deathmatch.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Nonetheless, they do a good job of setting up both. You're assuming that this is the real world for the first part, and but they also give hints that reality might not be what it seems.
Yeah, it ain't what it used to be.
Yeah, before we were talking to and we discussed that it's interesting that this came out the same year as Matrix, which also deals with not alternate, but deeper realities.
Right.
And it's just. That fits the theme there.
Sure. So, I mean, like I said, I think I'm biased towards eXistenZ, but I still think it stands. It's a good intro, jumps you right in, and tells you everything you need to know, pretty much. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to give it a 1.
I'll give it a 1 as well.
Yep. All right. And that'll bring us to the body of the movie with you, Dave.
So, interestingly enough, as I'm watching this, especially now, this movie was filmed in 1999.
Yep.
Before gaming gaming now is a huge
thing.
Good
point.
The story. The basic story is they go through different stages, essentially
more or less,
to NPCs and having to have complete tasks. That sounds like an RPG.
Yep.
It's very RPG-ish.
It's an MMO.
It's an MMO.
Slash RPG.
I wouldn't go as far as an MMO, but definitely like a group game, a multiplayer game with a bunch of people. And they go through different stages. The first stage is the video game stage. They're in a video game store.
Yep.
Or for the theme of the movie. Then they're in Chinese. The trout farm. I missed the trout farm.
Yeah.
And then they're in the Chinese.
That's Act 1, Act 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're going through the stages. So then they get to the end, which they're in the end of the game essentially, and that's where. That's really where that whole multiple levels of the game or the reality really start to fit in.
Yeah.
And I think that as a gamer now, after the past 10, 20 years, you really see the game elements, and that's really interesting in the body of this work because this is really a game. It's a movie about a game.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it, and which for 1999 is pretty...
I was saying, kind of ahead of its time.
Definitely ahead of its time.
So, like, one of the things I really enjoy about this is that the main characters don't know that they're in a game, or at least
They sometimes do, but then
on a very high level, they know they're in a game. But once they start getting into it, it's definitely immersed them.
Yeah.
But you really don't know which characters are NPCs and which ones are actual real people, because part of the whole game like mythology that they have here is that in order for a game like this to function, you have drives that are installed in you that you wouldn't do
plot
otherwise.
elements have to happen regardless of your free will.
So, like, for instance, the Chinese food waiter, which is a very famous scene from this thing, it turns out he's a player, even though all of his actions suggested that he was an NPC.
Yeah.
And Jennifer Jason Leigh, that's her name, right?
Yep.
You don't know, really. There's a part where she is
An NPC.
right. And where is she in a reality here, and when is she just part of the game? It's kind of mind-twisting with that, and that's one of the points I like about this.
Perhaps hallmarks of cerebral films. Sure, no, I mean, I agree for a large part. Like I said, I'm going to like this film a lot, and I think it still stands. So the testament to how quality it is. But because of the nature of it, and again, we'll get into this probably in a couple more questions coming up. But nevertheless, throughout the body, I think it sustains itself. Like you said, okay, now next level of now we have to go to this scene or whatever.
Even when you're talking about the NPC characters and they're actually actors, in my head, like watching the movie, I almost seen the game dialogue pop up. And I have to choose which one you want to say.
And
it's like,
it feels a lot like that, and they even comment upon it. So all I'm saying is, I think it sustains itself throughout pretty well, with all like the plot twists and turns that are like pretty much game plot twists and turns because of the nature of it. So I'm gonna give it a solid 1.
Absolutely.
All right. And that will bring me to conclusion. So similar sort of bookended, as we said about intro, it's rather quick. It's probably like the intro is probably 20 minutes or so, and so is the conclusion, I would say. It's like when the revolutionaries, the realists who are against the virtual reality technology burst through the door, and ostensibly you're supposed to believe that they're in real life, like the layer 0 of reality, I suppose. But of course, it's all absurd, and there's like a fucking like explosion battle happening all around. Like the questionable things are still happening, and then of course it cuts to the TransCense scene, which is, it turns out, eXistenZ itself was all a game level of a new game called TransCense that they're playtesting, and Jude Law and Jennifer Jason Leigh are not. They're part of the playtest group. She is not the actual game designer, and they, after having played the TransCense designed by the actual game designer, turns out they are agents of realism in the real world. And the very last line of the movie is their goal is to assassinate that game designer. Mm-hmm. The very last line is them going up to the man who was the Chinese waiter in eXistenZ, and him saying, "Are we still in the game? Can someone tell me?" And then boom, cuts to black. So yeah, again, it makes you think.
One key thing that actually gives it away, in my opinion, is that scene when they come out and Jude Law's character goes, "Hey, wasn't he the cashier in the game?"
Yeah.
And it's like right at that moment, you're sort of like, if you haven't figured out, you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, is this a game within a game within a game?"
Exactly.
Well, they have the white dog appear again, who various people have owned during this thing, and they always bring the gun,
or even the bone gun that appears in every single layer of the game.
It's in every stage, if you will,
and it's almost exactly the same each time. So you're sort of just like, all right, now where am I?
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say that there are arguably 3 or 4 different levels to this thing, but I don't want to get into the whole like what belongs where timeline type thing. What's I think more important is how each they'll have actors doing ridiculous accents and then later comment on like, "I had a ridiculous accent in that."
Comment at the end.
I don't know, the like judging who's real, who's not, what events. This is what's important in this, and it's kind of a really neat study of reality. And now that VR is a big thing.
Yeah, now that's more real, more accessible, more able to be realized, if you will, than ever. And of course, I agree. And yeah, like I said, it wraps itself up quite nicely. But of course, never answers the question of which reality, which one are we in, which layer is it? Right. And it doesn't actually matter, I would say, as long as you're still questioning it. Like it's possible that it is or it isn't. And it leaves you uncertain. That's kind of the whole point.
Like the Matrix, when you're like, "What am I? Is this real?" That's one of the lines in the Matrix. It's the same concept where you're not sure of the reality because what is real? Define real.
No, I agree, and that's why I'm going to give conclusion on 1. It sort of ties in. So it brings us to themes with you, of course.
1 for you,
one
Scott.
conclusion. Yeah.
And 1's
That's
all the
what I
way
thought.
down.
Yeah, of course. So a lot of things we just said, I think, are going to be encapsulated by themes, which is going to be you, sir.
I want to bring up the fact that it takes place in a church. I think that there's
some symbolism there.
Well, there's obvious ones because when she's initially introduced, the game designer is positioned right under the cross.
Yes.
The stained glass. It gives a lot of kind of that. I don't think there's necessarily a religious element but they're trying to do the idea of
game creators are God. That's what they're going to say.
Even the concept of religion in reality.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, they called her the goddess half the time.
Yeah, that's true.
The demon is the other half.
Yeah, or the demon. Exactly.
That's a good point.
So there's who controls reality. There's a lot of discussion over this game makes no sense. We don't know who's going to kill us.
Or why.
Situation to situation. And it's but that's basically reality. So I don't know. It explores a lot of existential themes.
If you will, as a pun. No, I mean, of course, I definitely agree. And like I said, I enjoy this movie a lot. Because of that, I think you've seen movies that tried to do what it did and sort of either fell flat or were more forgotten. I think this one is still... It might be more than a cult classic, but certainly not hugely popular. But nevertheless, as I said, it stands, and those themes are perhaps more relevant now than ever because of what you said about the game stuff.
Yeah. Well,
about technology that we have.
If you take VR and with AR and all the technologies that people are trying to do to immerse people, this is definitely relevant today.
Yeah. It's at the time it sort of seemed like the absurd end of the scale, but now we indeed can perhaps come closer to achieving it. But nevertheless, it's still a very famous central thing, even just sci-fi and stuff in general. But how real is reality? And if we can create a fake reality, what would be the difference if it's real? If it's so convincingly real that you may not even know.
Right.
Yeah. I can't really think of a science fiction work that delves into this aspect of
specifically, sure,
issue as well as it has. So I'm going to give it a strong 1 for that.
Yep, me too. All right.
I want to bring up another theme that I
ahead.
find really interesting is the fact that
go for it.
In the game, right, or in the film, the game, while they're in the game, everything's organic. There's no electronics.
Yeah, that's true. They built it on parts or ports or whatever.
Neural ports, harvested from mutated amphibians, which, maybe it's a little crazy, but all right. But then when they come out into the second, the real world to them, so we're talking about not in the game as we know, as far as we know the reality, they're wearing these plastic
it looks like
helmets.
Looks like what a 90s vision.
Exactly, it's like a messed up power glove and power helmet,
But even the what precedes that is straight up legitimate war, Molotov cocktails being thrown and things. It loses the kind of fantastical element that it had previously.
Right.
So the closer you get to reality, the more
realistic. I put that in quotes. Realistic. It gets.
No, I get you.
And then even they zoom in on the hand.
Yep.
And it's this plastic thing, and you're well, that's obviously some type of peripheral accessory. But while you're going through the whole film, it's the bioports, all organic and biological, and I think that's an interesting theme to be putting into something that's about games.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I always thought because it's Cronenberg, so the body invasion stuff is it's sort of a hallmark of his style, but it makes sense within that, and
that's what
it adds to the themes overall. I would definitely agree.
Also, the fact is that just having the peripheral, just having the equipment in a way is much different than you actually being penetrated by your spine, and in a sense, it's more visceral. Again, body horror, but also to that point, again, the farther you're getting away from the reality, the more kind of organic it becomes.
Sure. It's a good sort of mirror there.
Right.
But I definitely think Themes deserves a pretty strong 1.
Right.
And I think we're all giving it as such.
Yep.
All right. And that'll bring us to the antagonists with you, Dave.
All right.
Who or what you think it may be?
I think if the antagonist isn't obviously a person,
there's no central corporeal character.
Yeah, exactly. The antagonist is reality.
Of course. Finally someone agrees with me.
You don't know. That's the whole point.
In that sense.
You do not know the reality. That is the, for all intents and purposes, the enemy, because you don't know the enemy. You don't know which one's reality. Sure. And reality is the one, messing with you. They're messing with every single character through the use of technology, which is obviously one of the themes through this.
Yep, I absolutely agree.
My counter for that is, I don't think reality is necessarily messing with them, because I don't think you're ever introduced to reality, and if you are, it's a very brief moment.
But even that,
but that's what he's kind of saying. Like, what is reality? I guess then it would be the antagonist.
I don't think that's like. I know that there is something antagonistic in Jude Law, and it is a question of like, what is reality and not. But I think he, in a sense, he's. Aside from his in-game character, in a way that we follow through most of this, when he's outside of it, he's very purposeful, and he's also volunteered for this situation. So, I think any antagonism he has is almost illusory, in a way. And
that's kind of the point. What do you think?
Go up, finish up.
That was his kind of point. Go ahead.
Well, the thing with the reality is, when you play games today, anybody who plays a game, you're escaping reality. You're immersing
to a degree, for sure.
To a degree,
of course.
In whatever game you're playing. People who play Madden, sports games, they're immersing themselves. They're pretending they're the star. They're playing football, playing basketball, whatever.
Sure.
When you're playing an MMO, you're immersing yourself in this world where everybody's across. It's a different world and everything else, and it's an immersion. So that's a fight against reality. That's to say, I am not in reality. I am in a different world, and I want to, experience something. And I think that in this film, that's exactly what's happening. And the end, when the guy says, is this still the game? That's the whole point. This escape from reality, and some people will fight that and say this is dangerous. This is not something we can do. And some people will say this is
embrace it,
and this is how life is.
You make very good points, but I'm still I don't think I'm leaning towards one for antagonists.
I'm mostly on Dave's side, and I always have been about ever since this film became one of my most enjoyed films to watch. So I see what you're saying as well, but I think it's sort of encapsulated in a line of dialogue when Jude Law says something like, "We're wandering around, stumbling around, blind in this universe, like trying to figure out objectives that may not even exist, and being assaulted by forces we can't control and are unknowing." And she says, "Yeah, that's a game everyone's playing, i.e., life."
And if you're antagonized by life, then you failed at living life.
I don't think so. I feel antagonized by life. Maybe I have failed.
Exactly.
Fuck you.
I'm giving it a 0, and
I'm giving it a 1.
I'm giving it a 1
just for that. All right. I was going to give it a 1 anyway, but now even a harder one because of you. Anyway.
Interesting, going into the next question, right? So who is the protagonist then?
Well, it's to me, and I'll try to answer it for you. The film, of course, wants us to think it's Jude Law and Jennifer Jason Leigh. However, the film also tells us that they're playing like stock character parts, essentially, when they're in the game. And maybe even at the end, they're the stock assassins who've come to, win their rebellion against a force they think is oppressing them, or humanity in some sense.
Well, the whole religion thing actually plays a lot into this now, because you're basically talking about your role in reality. So
sure.
Their roles were assassins, as far as we know.
There's actually a term for this where God... predestination.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's predestination. Is your role is to be the assassin of these people, and that fits it completely into the game, into the theme. I'm sorry, I keep saying game because it's a game. Yeah. It's a movie about a game, but it's a game, and
it's a game about a movie and a movie about a game. Again, it's games and movies all the way down, obviously.
All right.
But no, like the thing is, this one is a tougher one because I like their portrayals, and maybe I'll talk more. Well, I'll talk more probably in secondary in just a sec, but. Because of the nature of it, like, I may have to give this one like a default blank 0 kind of, because like, well, like I said, yes, I thought the acting was good and the script called for like some interesting acting, if you will, because of the nature of the game, reality, etc. I just don't know, like, as protagonists, even within and without, that they get there.
The question, I guess, I could ask in general is, do we need a protagonist in this film?
Yes. Well, I think that's a good point.
It is set up that you constantly follow Jude Law's story.
Sure, of course, but
like you never see you'll see Jude Law without Jennifer Jason Leigh, but you'll never see Jennifer Jason Leigh without Jude Law. He's the one playing. It's basically like you're watching someone play a video game,
right? Exactly. Like, But that's the problem. There's no protagonist.
It's not always that interesting either. Like, I get that. I think you guys have convinced me to give it a stronger 0 than I was going to, but I was leaning towards it anyway. I think that, though, I do agree that kind of fits and makes sense. So, like I said, while the acting...
Like you said before, the levels, we were discussing levels, does it really matter? Does it really matter, though, that the film doesn't have a true protagonist?
No, I mean, it's fine. It's just that on our system, I'm going to have to give it a 0 for that. But I think it still fits.
Now that you point that out, it's sort of a more interesting version of watching NPCs wander around like a WoW village.
Like a bot. Like if you had a bot and you just let it go in a village and like, what are they doing? Nothing. They're just literally waiting
like,
for you guys.
What are the lives of the Skyrim NPCs while we're not watching them? Sure, I think that's really funny, but I'm still going to have to give it a 0. I think, everyone is...
I think 0 across the board, I think.
Softer-ish. All right, well, that'll bring you back to secondary E.
Well, on the bright side, though, that you can have interesting secondary characters without having a protagonist in it. And I think that this movie excels at creating a diverse cast of characters that you follow throughout the Chinese waiter. Prime example of that. William Dafoe playing a creepy gas station.
I don't know if he's playing anything, but,
His character called for it, man.
Yep.
And also, but again, seeing these people manifest in different versions of reality really worked for me because it actually, like, people have to do different accents, people have to do different character. Like, William Dafoe was like this kind of menacing gas station attendant, and then when you see him in a different reality, he's like kind of a shy.
He's a meek, like, I liked it. Sure.
It's interesting. Again, the game theme is if you've played any more modern MMOs or even large RPGs, the portrayal of the secondary characters is really like meeting an NPC.
Exactly. That's why I think it's always been great. It's always funny.
The pausing when they talk, and if you don't say the right thing, they just respond with some blank answer or non-answer until you say the right
some blanket phrase that they're going to say to you, like regardless, until you advance the plot with them.
Can I help you? You know, or can I help you? And if you don't say the right thing, you know, they out of the 10 choices or 4 choices, they say, I don't know anything about that. Yeah. Can I help you? It's just
sorry, I can't help you with that. Or whatever.
To bring up that point, like Westworld did very well, good as well, but this is another prime example.
This is an early iteration.
NPC, in reality.
I absolutely agree with both you guys, and I always love that. And Jennifer recently even point out, she's like, they'll just be stuck in a game loop until you say something, like to say their like character NPC like shopkeeper name.
Almost 20 years later, the games are still like that.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a little bit different now, but almost.
But still, like the core of it is that like you're talking to the same shopkeeper or whatever until you say the right plot advancing thing. Otherwise, they spit the same shit back at you until you choose to advance. So I think it was always, and like this probably ties into the next question, but as you said, it was a diverse range of characters who you got to see like a little bit of a different light here and there because again of the game nature of it. So I think they collectively, I don't really have a favorite. Maybe the Trout guy who was actually like he was the game designer. If you guys noticed that, like he had long hair.
Well,
he was Yuri or whatever. Like in the transcendence level, he was
and
the
what
designer.
We think may actually be reality, but not sure.
But in eXistenZ level, he was like their inside man at the factory. So like that, I mean, they're all collectively maybe the mutants, like the little pods or whatever, like they count as props perhaps. But I'm just saying collectively, the secondary characters were interesting, diverse, and entertaining, and I'm going to give them a 1.
Yeah.
So 1's all around?
Yep, looks like it. And speaking of what I just mentioned, Dave, you're on to dialogue.
Like I said, the dialogue is excellent. It follows what I guess you could call as game theory. Or you're the main character who says their things. And even those, as at the end, you start thinking how much of that is the scripted dialogue that they were meant to say as part of the game design.
Exactly.
And based upon that, it melded well with the NPCs, and it felt fairly natural, knowing that they were NPCs.
Yeah.
And because it's a film and not actually a game, it's definitely more, it flows. It moves along. When you've played games, I've watched people play games. Mass Effect, to me, is one of the most disjointed games ever, because every single thing is a question. And you have to make choices. And in the end, to me, that's like a visual story.
Sure.
This is like a visual story that was well made.
Well, it was meant to be one. Right. It's
that's the point.
There's a dividing line. Yeah,
very
exactly.
well.
I gotcha.
I think that the dialogue is well written. Somebody knew how games work to make this film.
Yeah, I think Cronenberg either had some people who played games, or maybe he played a bunch of games himself as research. But I mean, like I said, I always thought that was a standout aspect of eXistenZ because of that, and being like very heavy gamers like we are, and having seen so much of that stuff in actual games, having it seen portrayed in a film that is about being in a game.
So you tackled one part of it, but this movie's also like delves into some philosophical issues.
I was basically leaving that side to you,
as we had mentioned previously. And here's the thing: is they don't. I don't really remember many exposition dumps in this work. They kind of naturally build this world.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Like before, like the dialogue flows. Yeah. Whether or not that's a scripted dialogue in the game or what they're actually thinking and saying, it moves along. It doesn't feel stilted.
But you have to explain to the audience what eXistenZ is and all these other aspects as a filmmaker, bringing all these fantastical elements. And regardless of what the characters are talking amongst each other, they'll bring up they'll drop one line, like what you mentioned earlier, Scott, about like reality and all, like kind of the ambling of this like fantasy world, and they're like, oh, how's that different than reality? And I think that they kind of handle their business really well, and they explain the fantasy and handle the dropping philosophical things without being heavy-handed.
Sure, yes. I definitely agree. Like, they don't it's not stilted or awkward on either end. And it, like you said, David, flows very naturally, so I think that it helps out the film a lot. But of course, I always found it amusing when Jennifer Jason is like, you have to say his name again before he'll respond to you because it's a fucking NPC. Yeah. But then they'll also, like, here and there, like, Jude Law starts questioning. He, in fact, I think one of your favorite parts, David, goes, "Existence is now on pause," and like wakes up back in like a different layer of reality, things like that.
It's his face on the table.
He just falls over in the game world. So it's all, like you said, it all keeps flowing throughout very, very well, very connects to itself.
It doesn't feel stilted. It doesn't feel paused. It doesn't feel forced. It just
exactly
the dialogue. This is what they're saying. If it's natural or not, it works well.
Even at points that it's obviously like, you know, the Chinese waiter thing, like,
right.
You sure you want the special? Like everyone's saying stilted things, but because the nature of it makes sense. Yeah. So I'm gonna give it a 1.
Yep.
1.
Give it a 1.
All right.
I guess one last thing is that if you're talking about sudden nature, like the lampshade.
Yeah, exactly. So like you gotta give them credit on that front as well. Well, that'll bring me to style. So Cronenbergian, I mean, it's sort of classic Cronenberg. Like, if you've never seen eXistenZ, but you have seen other Cronenberg films, you've basically seen, like, the pod stuff, of course, is the famous, like, the mutant entrails, I suppose, they use to build their game pods, and the having a port into the small of your back that inserts into you. It's like, you know, obviously like sexualized imagery, kind of in a sense, but he's always been about that. And
when Jude Law goes and tries to push his tongue into the body part.
Like you've seen that shit before, and it's probably in a Cronenberg film if it's not this one. So it's still, it's always going to be there, and it's fine. And overall, like, I think even like some of the little like two-headed mutant that runs around lizard thing, like that sort of like the mascot shows up. It's a competently shot film. Cronenberg is a good director, regardless of his body horror fetish, if you will.
A lot of good practical effects in this.
Yeah, it looks pretty solid.
A wide variety for the levels of the game. Like the Chinese food restaurant, the fish factory, like even like the mall that scene at the when they first get into
the game store.
Right.
That has very stylized, and it looks dated, but it purposely looks like 80s dated for it. So like it's Cronenberg.
Even the clothes that Jennifer Jason wears, you could see the different layers of the reality, and in the game world, the game world, she's wearing a skirt.
Right.
In the other game world, she's wearing pants.
That's right.
And then outside,
I've always noticed that.
She's wearing something else, and like normal.
She's wearing like jeans and a sweater or whatever. Yeah.
And even that is an interesting style. Again, like in the Matrix, when they're in the Matrix, it's that green shade.
Sure.
When they're in reality, it's normal color.
More toned down. Yeah.
More toned down, but they don't need to do that because whenever they're in every other layer, their clothes are different. And
subtle things like that are switching.
But make it, true. And then your brain's like, oh, well, it's a different reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. It's perfectly solid. It's not like the most amazing cinematography, but it works. It's very competently put together. And like you said, the practical effects and so forth always look pretty good. So I'm going to give it a solid 1. Yeah.
Does anyone do music soundtrack stuff?
I mean, Steve-O, Dave's probably the biggest bigger on soundtracks.
The music is Howard Shore. He's done I actually can't remember all of a sudden what he's done, but he's done a lot of scores. I like the scores. The music fits very well. Again, it's very gamey.
Yeah, it's sort of in the background.
Thematic.
Yeah.
It's in the background. You're hearing it, but it's not overpowering.
But it makes
and it's
sense.
Not, it adds to the drama when it needs to. It pulls back. It messes with your emotions when it's when it wants to. And it says, "Hey, this is supposed to be like the scene where they're in the shop at the games or in the whatever the back room of the game store, and they're all hot and ready to go. You hear the music, and it's just enough to be like seducing and titillating, but not like bam, it's time for sex.
It's almost like cliched romantic, but because that's what fucking happened in the game. You see, like
exactly
it all makes
in
sense.
the game, and for somebody to make that, that to do that
matches really well.
It matches really well, and Howard Shore is one of those people who
Yeah,
can do that.
I certainly agree. And
Anyway,
that adds to our score of 1 for Style, I believe. All right, so now we're finally on to the last question with E. Do you recommend eXistenZ and/or, I suppose, as our modified scale for this little experiment in cerebral films? Is it in fact a cerebral film?
It 100% holds up. A little bit dated, perhaps, in some of the visual aspects, but I still think it's like as narrated, it 100% holds up. And I do think it's a cerebral film. I think it leaves you asking like questions about the reality. I study a little bit of like doubt in philosophy, and that they ask for. I'm considering this like a attempt for Cronenberg at not necessarily but like a Matrix level film. I think is a
questioning reality.
Sure. Delving
what
into
is reality?
it.
So but it is for like a general audience, or at least people who have interest in that. And I think it brings up enough questions that people can come out of it and like have a good discussion about like what they saw in the film. And I think that if that doesn't count as a cerebral film, I don't know what does.
As we have had one. What do you think?
It's a cerebral film, in my opinion.
All right.
If so, this is why, because of the list, like the definition of what you think cerebral is. I mean, to me, we talked about it. A cerebral film is something when you walk away and you're thinking about for not because that was a good movie because I like the action, but something that touches your mind that says, hey, I'm thinking about this. Why? And then how did this film affect me thinking about this? I mean, that's what cerebral is. It's something that's messing with your brain that you're actually like, not, visuals. Like, I love Marvel movies, but what are Marvel? They're not cerebral films. They're explosions,
they're popcorn,
and fights, they're popcorn and culture,
summer films,
pop culture, whatever you want to call it. Getting a bunch of stars, the comic book stars, heroes together. That's not cerebral. Cerebral is a movie like eXistenZ where it actually makes you say, hey, what is reality? And so I mean this is definitely 100% cerebral.
I fully agree with you guys. Like I said, this has always been one of my favorite films ever since I first saw it, and I watch it every now and again fairly frequently, so it was nice that it fell into our category of cerebral this evening, and I enjoyed watching it again, and I do think it still stands, and is damn worth, if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out, and if you haven't, just haven't in a while, like I just mentioned, check it out again. It still makes you think, and it's still well put together.
It holds up 100%, especially even today, like we talked about with VR and AR.
Yeah, perhaps even more so today, which is, I think, even more of a credit and testament to it. So I think that'll do it, and I think we're going to go E with the total scores here.
All right, so I give it an 8, and the rest give it a 9, giving a total score of an 8.66.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. It's very highly, I think, deserved credit film. So all right. Anything else to add? Anything you want to ask if we're in the right layer of reality? Is the game over? I think the game maybe is over.
I don't know. The game is over, maybe, but it's not. Sure. Like he said, are we still in the game?
The game is never over.
Well, if we are in a game, I'm just like, this NPC doing the.
We're all NPCs. Well, whether or not we are and what level we're in, I still remain Scott Thurlow here with Jane Manzer.
Good night.
And Dave Fung.
Thank you. Have a good night.
See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.